Welcome to another episode of Sacred Synergy. Our guest today is Dr. Thomas Legere. With a background that includes degrees in philosophy, theology, and spirituality, in addition to a PhD in psychology, Tom Legere offers a perspective that is truly holistic. He's the author of 3 books, he's been a frequent speaker on television, and he has offered workshops in psycho-spiritual growth and counseled hundreds of people over a 40-year-plus career. Tom continues to offer spiritual retreats as well as his insights through his online presence. He's a world-class speaker and workshop leader, and he's recognized globally as an articulate yet simple teacher of spiritual practices. He was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from Fordham University in 2010. If you've ever watched or listened to episodes of the American Tarot Association podcast, you will most likely remember Tom from a series of 3 episodes that we recorded focusing on the synergy between the great thinkers Pierre Teilhard and Carl Jung. Beyond being a wonderful partner for dialogue on these topics, Tom is a mentor and a close friend. I continue to learn a lot from him, and our prayer is that you will find our time together life-giving. This is the first episode of Sacred Synergy that was recorded in person. As a one-man production team, I've opted to keep the podcast recordings online through platforms like Zoom and Riverside. Tom and I gave it a whirl in person this time, and other than getting up once in the beginning of the conversation to check and make sure that the camera was still recording, which I just included because I don't find it appropriate to edit that stuff out really, it was a smooth process. So we will see about potential future episodes being recorded in person. Being a good friend, it was appropriate that Tom and I could be in each other's physical presence to have this exchange of energy. I'm very grateful for the wisdom that emerged within our recorded time together. It's now time to sit back and enjoy this conversation at the heart of evolution. Tom, thank you so much for being with us on Sacred Synergy.
So happy to be here, and it's great what you're doing. I think this is God's work. I just have to get that out of the way here. It's wonderful, and all to the greater honor and glory of God.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that affirmation and for your presence here today. Your willingness, to be on the podcast, but also for you coming out here for an in-person recording. This is the first in-person recording I'm doing of this podcast project. And I was just talking with Tom before and saying how, for me, podcasts are really something that is audio only. I think that's how they were initially created, and then eventually video got added on with the advent of YouTube, and now Spotify includes video if podcasts have it. But I am a big fan of the audio because it's really the only format that you can multitask with. And having a bunch of young children myself, I do a lot of multitasking, so I appreciate the listenability of it all. But at any rate, I think that it's appropriate that Tom and I are in person today because he is a good mentor, friend of mine, and that in-person energy exchange is something that is irreplaceable. So I think it's just very fitting that we're having this conversation in person today. So Tom, please tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do with most of your time in the world.
Okay. How can I summarize 81 years into about 3 minutes? First of all, this goes without saying, I'm nobody special. All through grammar school and high school, just an average student, maybe below average athlete, but just average. And the thing I guess I was probably known for the best when I left high school was I used to be a dancer on Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
Get out of here. I never knew that.
Oh, yeah. Now, that impresses people.
Okay.
They don't care about books and lectures and all that. Oh, you used to dance on Bandstand. So I did that. Moved on to college. At that point, I was in the seminary system for the Diocese of Camden, New Jersey, and did okay in 4 years of college, graduated from Marquette with a degree in philosophy. Then, and nobody could quite figure out why this happened, the diocese sent me to Rome to study theology. And I went over there way over my head, I think, Out of the 50 guys in my class, probably I was number 50 still in terms of intelligence. This is not false humility. It really isn't. So anyhow, I got ordained a priest over at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Came back to the Diocese of Camden. And something began to happen to me after about 5 years in the ministry. I started to realize that I didn't know anything about God in my heart. I knew it in my head. I had all this study in philosophy and theology and graduated with honors over in Rome and all that stuff. But I was feeling like a phony because I was talking about God, but I did not have a first-hand experience of God. So at that point, I asked the bishop if I could go and study spirituality. And eventually he said yes, but he had to tell me, first of all, what he really thought about me. He said, I got to tell you this. I think you're arrogant, you're immature, and you're abrasive. Lately, somebody asked me, how many of those do you think were true? I said, probably all three. So there I was, this guy who didn't feel God, who was a rebel. I was a good communicator all the time, and a good writer, but that was it. So we'll talk about this part maybe a little bit later. I went to a 30-day retreat before I began my studies up at Fordham, and that changed my life in a way that I hadn't foreseen. I thought that those 30 days would just polish up my image. You know, this young, dynamic, charismatic priest, good-looking guy, everybody loves him, and nobody knows really that he doesn't know anything about God. So God decided to just crack me open at that point in a dramatic way. It was one of those experiences a little bit like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. I don't want to dramatize it too much, but I was a changed man, a changed human being from that time on. So I still had to carry the baggage of being this superficial kind of a guy that everybody loved, but yet I now knew in my heart that I carried a treasure within this earthen vessel. So from that time on, 31 years of age, up until about 49, I stayed in the ministry, and it became tougher and tougher to integrate universal knowledge into just a Catholic container. So the way I describe it is I overflowed it. And so there's two parts to my life. And I eventually left the ministry. I was close to 50 at the time. Very few people stay around that long if they don't think it's a good fit. But I just kept trying to, figure out how can I communicate all this. Eventually it was time to move on. And since then, I'm an unaffiliated spiritual teacher. Had all these jobs. I've taught in different colleges and universities and won awards and all this kind of stuff. But every day, all I think about is God and how to communicate God to people. So that's who I am.
Yeah, and you are a bridge builder in that capacity too. I would imagine that was in some way tempered in your formative experience in terms of your own spiritual growth and upcoming, especially within the tension, being a priest within the church, while also then having a larger vision for yourself, for the world, for our spiritual growth in that way. And you have to learn how to choose your battles, I guess, in some ways, in order to pursue, that integral path, right? It's not a path that is just going to agree for the sake of agreeing and being a company man or woman, right? And play the party line with things, but a path that pursues authenticity at any cost. Like you said, you had the transformational experience that really cracked things open for you.
Oh, totally.
And I go to the language, well, you used St. Paul, right? But cracking open, I think of the tomb being cracked open, or the stone rolling away on Easter Sunday, revealing the empty tomb and the transformed Christ in that way. So, yeah, that language, I think, is very intentional in that way that you use with that experience. And, in that vein of building bridges and cracks and the challenges of being a bridge builder, it's a structure, right? A bridge is a structure that connects two disparate bodies, we might say, in some way, over the water or a canyon or something like that. So throughout your life and your experience of being a bridge builder, and you also said you were a communicator too. So what gifts and what challenges do you face in being a bridge builder?
It's funny, the word pontifex.
Just have to get up for 1 second.
Sure.
Yeah, but keep sharing, please. Yeah.
Okay. The word pontifex is a title that is given to the Pope, and it means a bridge builder, kind of between heaven and earth. But the difficulty there is that when you're a bridge builder, you don't satisfy totally people who are on one side of the river or the other. You're always caught in the middle, and you have to pay a price for that. It's going to cost you every day of your life. But I could never, from that point on, 31 and a half years of age, I guess I was, just be a company man. To me, part of being opened up the way God did with me was I could see the interconnection of everything. It was a little scary to think about for such an ordinary guy like myself, but it was like infused knowledge. I kind of just understood the connections everywhere. And I could never choose one over the other. And probably the first big challenge that I faced there was to try to integrate theology and spirituality, right? And then spirituality and psychology. And as you know, and I'm sure all your viewers know, psychology and religion have been enemies for the longest time. And there's an explanation for that, real quickly. Freud, who's considered the father of modern day psychology, he's actually a psychiatrist, by the way, just for the record, he wasn't a psychologist. He had no time at all for religion. And the thing is, though, the kind of religion that he was rejecting, I was already at that point rejecting as well. But he couldn't see the value of symbol. He couldn't understand patterns. He couldn't understand how we are destined to evolve from where we are. He was just trying to help people get a good functioning ego so they could work in the world. There's nothing wrong with that.
Like an auto mechanic kind of.
There you go.
Keep the machine running.
That's all. Yeah. Just keep it going. He said, because so many people can't do that. So, all right. Jesus says, those who are not against us are with us. So, it wasn't like I disagreed with him so much, but I went way deeper into the psychology field. And then truth keeps opening up. And eventually I went into Teilhard de Chardin, that everybody here, I'm sure, knows all about. And that was more spirituality and science.
Yeah.
Okay. And the person in psychology that really helped me the most was Carl Jung. He was a huge influence on my life. I remember studying Jung when I was up at Fordham, and I'm sitting there in the front row taking these copious notes, and one of the students came up to me afterwards and said, "Boy, you take the best notes of anybody I've ever seen." And I looked at them and I said, "Well, for you, this is just a course. For me, this is survival." And they looked at me like I had two heads, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
That's how much I was into this. And then I guess you'd kind of say, finally, science and spirituality also lured me in, because truth is one. It's unitary. There's just different pathways up the one mountain.
Yeah.
And when we get to the top of the mountain, we're going to see we were all in the same mountain, just taking different pathways to get there.
And there you go. You're a communicator in that way. You take something that is very complex and you make it light, or you bring it into the light in some way, right? And
this is my gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife, Paula, who has been a teacher for me over the years, she says you can look at the back of a book where they just have the summary, and you can stand up and give a lecture on that. And she says, it'll still be pretty good. And yeah, just to kind of follow up on that point of being this kind of a teacher, I'm not a researcher, right? But God gave me this gift to teach, and to be able to teach, you have to make things simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're simplistic, but your job is to communicate.
That's right.
And I think the way God was setting me up, being this average student who, barely got through high school, all of a sudden, this perhaps sounds grandiose, but this one friend of mine who knew me back then, he says, "I can't believe it." He said, "I read one of your books, and when I knew you, you were just this guy who walked around with a smile on his face all the time. And now you seem like you're the smartest guy in the world." And of course I'm not, but it's this way I know that anything that I have been able to teach, it's not Tom Legere. That guy died when I was 31 and a half. This is all, I hope, the Spirit of God coming through.
Right, yeah. And being a bridge builder, specifically, yourself also being a psychologist and a therapist in those capacities, can you share a little bit about your formative years in terms of what led you into that field, and really kind of like how that has evolved since then, how your practice has evolved, how your perspective on the field has evolved? Yeah.
It's always been evolution, and it's always been God. There's never been like a logical explanation for the things that happen. For example, when I was in Rome as a student, these are some of the smartest guys in the country. They used to call it the West Point of the Catholic Church. And I'm this character who's like number 50 out of the class of 50. But there were certain things that drew me. For example, there was one little minor course that was taught up there, and I'm probably the only one in history who ever thought it was a great course. It was called Christian Anthropology. It meant understanding what a human being is, and also a spiritual being. And most people, okay, they just moved on.
Right.
That fascinated me. So from day one, once I got my spiritual awakening, at that point my head was still spinning, I said, I have to figure out, this is my task in life, to figure out how to communicate these deep and profound things to people in ways that they can understand. So becoming a psychologist then, the word psychologist comes from the Greek, and it means the study of the soul. So the way I saw it, there was really no contradiction between spirituality and psychology. So I began to build that bridge. And then, of course, here we are with the problem of being a bridge builder again. The people on the spirituality side, they think I'm too in love with psychology. And the psychology people thought I was perhaps being superstitious. I couldn't back up everything with data. So you're always hanging out there. But yet I knew that that's what God wanted me to do. I can't do hardly anything else in life.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for my wife because, she says, we've come to this conclusion. I'm kind of like a spiritual savant. I can go on and talk about these things, and it's wonderful, but don't ask me to change a light bulb. It's those kind of things. So.
You mentioned the term infused knowledge before.
Yeah.
And I think that eventually is going to take us down the path of mysticism in some way, because that is,
yes.
If we were like teaching a theology course right now on mysticism, we would be using that terminology, right?
Yeah, we would.
Yeah, infused contemplation, infused knowledge, natural contemplation, supernatural contemplation, those types of, those phases of the mystical process, right, by which we're passing through this. And you also talk about this language of reading the language of the human being and the spiritual being, and how that all made sense to you in a way, right? I immediately think of when I'm talking with my wife, and she or I might be unclear with each other, and I'm like, can you please be more specific? You said, can you get that thing off the thing over there? And I don't know what that thing is, or where over there is, or that type of thing. And I'm there I go again with it, right? That type of thing. But I am just as guilty as using that nebulous language sometimes too. So, like yourself, when I see something that is spelled out in a language that I can understand, in a form of communication that I can digest, it's like all the bells go off, and sometimes I almost feel silly because it's like I don't know how I never understood this before, but it took me seeing it spelled out or explained or spoken about in this way for it to click. And I think that's, just as an aside, like kind of a skill that so many people not are missing, but could work to refine in their life, right?
But I do think, it's true, you can refine it, but either you have it or you don't. In other words, there's such a thing as like a born teacher.
Yeah.
And when I would write, I have, like, two of my books, for example, have virtually no footnotes. And, in the beginning, this guy's arrogant. How come you're not quoting other people?
Right. Yeah.
And I just said, look, this is my book. These are the things I've experienced, the things that I believe.
Right.
And if I'm wrong, okay, I very well could be wrong.
Sure.
But I just have an inner knowing about these things.
Yeah.
And one thing I do remember from philosophy, not much, but Socrates was known as the greatest teacher of all time, but he didn't teach. He asked questions because his approach was deep down, we all know the answers. Right. It's all infused.
Yeah.
You just need somebody to ask the questions to bring that out of them. And they'll answer their own questions that way.
Yeah. Think of how Jesus taught, too, in very simple ways.
Oh.
Parables based on nature, an agrarian society where that's what the people could identify with. He wasn't using these highfalutin philosophical concepts going way over their head, right? Yeah. Now, you just use the word again, infused.
Yes.
Again, we're leaning in this conversation towards mysticism. I mean, it is the topic that we agreed to talk about eventually.
Of course.
As we get there, as we introduce Tom and a little bit of his background and experience. But I think this topic of mysticism speaks to this craving that humanity has. It's inherent within all people. Might, like you said, be stronger in some than others. But how do you understand humanity's craving for spiritual truth as being greater sometimes than something religions can satisfy?
Because they have two different agendas. Religion is a system that is set up to kind of lead the masses to some sort of a basic understanding of our relationship with God. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. All right? This Sunday, there'll be millions of people who are going to churches, and here you and I are just talking across the table. But for some people, the religions are just not enough. And part of that, I think, has to do with evolution. We really have changed.
Yeah.
And there's nobody behind these changes, no cabal of people who are anti-religious. All you have to do is go to any of the churches today or synagogues, and you have the blue hairs and the white hairs. And this often in some of the families that have been the most religious.
Okay.
Like I knew guys who grew up in extremely strong Catholic families. And you would think, boy, there would be the families from which vocations to the priesthood and the religious life would come. It hasn't carried over. In fact, many of them are unchurched. So there's something really, really big going on. But yet, there's also an amazing, although small, awakening among millions of people in the world. It's helping us understand that we are part of God. And what religion is supposed to do is give us an experience of God. It's supposed to transform us. But in many ways, what it often does is just reinforce the ego systems of the folks. So they come walking out of church and, oh, nice sermon today, Father or Reverend, but they don't expect to be changed. And it wasn't the intention of the church to change these people. It was to just give them a little bit of something that would take them out of themselves. Well, those days are over now. And the mystical path is going for a first-hand experience of God. That's really it in a nutshell. Whereas religion, by definition, is a second-hand experience. You're not having personal experiences of God. If you talk about that too much, your pastor is going to get nervous. Okay? But you are no longer satisfied with just having experiences of Jesus's experience. Oh, that's great. Oh, Jesus did this. Jesus did that. Oh, my God, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. Okay, Mass is over. But the idea that we are to follow, for example, the Christ path in a deep way inside ourselves, to understand that the heart is the altar, whereby now we can be present to God at any time. It's a full commitment on our part. Let me just, since I brought something along today, let me just point to this, okay?
We'll show and tell.
Show and tell, all right? Here is a picture that...
And if you're listening, we're going to include a picture of this so you can see it.
There you go. Okay. This is the picture in the Sistine Chapel called The Creation. And everybody in the world practically has seen it. It's God the Father. And it's Adam over here. And the two fingers are pointing at one another. But they don't touch. There's really no spark yet. Well, long story short, I gave a talk at a interfaith church not too long ago. It was called Wrestling with God. And I asked a friend of mine, once he put it up on YouTube, and if anybody's interested, by the way, they can get that. I have a YouTube channel, just Thomas Legere. It's called Wrestling with God. And I asked my friend who put it together, could you come up with an image of wrestling with God? I'll put it in your hands. So my part was just give the talk and give the title. But this gentleman who's a whiz in technology, used, of all things, artificial intelligence to change the posture of the hands. So now, rather than the fingers just pointing at one another, it's as if God is grabbing a hold of Adam and saying, it's time to stand up. It's time to be a full-blown child of God, because you are my son, my daughter. Stand up, I got you. And the title that I'm giving to this talk is now called Take Hold. And that's what this image is all about. So it looks at first like they're arm wrestling. And in a sense, the relationship that we have with God unfolds that way.
Yeah.
You know, nobody just walks into it. No, we wrestle, we're trying this and that to avoid things usually. But it's time. So the fingers were good, you know, back in the 1400s. But now it's 2025, and God is asking us to step up and be the answer and be the experience, and not just worship other people's experiences.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I was so grateful when you said you were going to talk about it, because at first it didn't sound like you were, and then
I know.
It's such a good image, though. It's just like, it maybe speaks 1,000 words, right? But I mean, it's powerful.
It is, and if I'm allowed to be proud of one little thing, even though it didn't come from me, it comes from God, it's this. I'm not that kind of a creative person. So I'm really excited about this.
Using the high technology of artificial intelligence, nonetheless. Too,
right.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yep.
So, like I said, our conversation has been leading in this direction.
Yes.
But the Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner, he once commented that the Christian of the future will be a mystic or will not exist. How do you interpret this idea in light of what we know so far about both mysticism, but also from what your experience is in reading and learning about quantum physics?
Okay. First of all, you wouldn't expect Karl Rahner to say this. You know, a very mainline, solid Jesuit theologian. But he realized that the days of just religion were coming to an end. And he said this, I think, back in the 1950s, way ahead of his time. And a change takes a long time to happen in evolution, right? And I think we still have varying degrees of people who are Christians. I think you have like three. You still have your traditionalists, and they don't want to change everything, and pretty much everything in church is literal. They have no problem with that. They don't want to hear about symbols from the collective unconscious, and they're not interested in this or anything. Just these are the traditionalists. Then you have the modernists. And I went through that phase in my life too. Whereas what you're supposed to be doing is just updating things.
Yeah.
Okay, so the people in church, you're trying to make the church more alive. You have these campaigns that are now on television to, you know, God gets us, and trying to call us back, and evangelism.
Branding and marketing.
Branding,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I've come to the conclusion that the world does not just keep getting better and goes in one direction, it goes up and down. So modernism doesn't make any sense to me. But the third type, so you have the traditionalists, you have the modernists, the updaters, but then you have the mystics. These are the people who have had a personal awakening, or they want one.
Yeah.
Often it happens that you have the awakening first, and then you figure out what to do with it.
Right, to make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly. There was a famous theologian, you know, who said that that what theology is faith seeking understanding. And some people go at it the reverse way, which I did for much of my life, and I still think it makes a lot of sense. You have human understanding, and then you get to a point of jumping off into the spiritual.
Yeah.
So that works too. That works too. But what happened with me, I guess, was it went the reverse. I'm walking along here just jumping through the hoops, and everybody loves me, and everything's great, and I'm on television and doing all this stuff, and I have the depth of a used car salesman at that point. No offense to used car salespeople, I hope. But, it worked the opposite for me, and that is that God awakened me. And then I tried to find out what the heck just happened to me. And I think that with a lot of your mystics, that's the way it worked.
Yeah.
It's not to say they had no brains before, people like Augustine, they thought, but they could never get from thought to experience. So God has to knock you over. I remember reading the Confessions of St. Augustine, and at one point he's explaining his conversion experience, where he fell on the ground and he's thrashing about. And I was sharing that experience with somebody one time, and they said, well, it sounds to me like he had a nervous breakdown. In a sense, he did. Right. He had a breakdown of one level.
Right.
So, to wrap this part up here, I think what's happening, God's in charge of this whole thing, by the way. You and I are not deciding anything. God's hitting a lot of people over the head. In different ways, though, not in traditional ways.
Right.
And they are going into the inner cathedral, and that's what's happening. So these mystics then are the folks who are going within. And, we shouldn't be shocked at this. Jesus, talked about the kingdom within. Funny, just one little quick comment on what you said there about Jesus using parables. One of the reasons I love Jesus so much is he knew a lot more than the parables. He could have laid stuff out. He could have talked about quantum physics and everything.
Sure, recited law and all that
stuff. Oh, yeah. He had the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he realized nobody would understand what he's talking about.
Right.
So, he went out of his way to dumb things down by choosing the 12 apostles, most of whom were uneducated and illiterate fishermen. And, he realized, let's talk on that level.
Yeah.
And, you give simple teachings like a parable. You never outgrow a parable. I mean, we could look at a parable that we studied back in third grade.
Right.
And now with doctorates, it still makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's what a good teacher does. This is what the church has to do. And it's not doing it. And I know I'm getting wound up here. I was talking about this to somebody the other day, and they had a good point. They said, Tom, it's not the job of the parish priest and the local congregation to be teaching mysticism. So, well, what is their job? Well, run the local branch of the organization, administer the 7 sacraments, and hope that they will give people enough to keep them going. And
it's a heck of a hope.
People, some are still, getting enough to keep going.
Right.
I mean, the churches haven't all closed down, although many are. They've all combined.
Right.
Convents are closed down. Seminaries are closed down. Rectories are closed down. The Catholic school system, for example, has closed down.
Parishes
effectively.
Merging.
All that. And you can pray for vocations. You can hope that all this is going to change. To that, I would say, God bless you, and prove me wrong.
Yeah.
But I see things at work here that are bigger.
Right.
than
Right.
little individual things happening.
Right.
The Spirit of God is at work. And sometimes God has to break things down first
Right.
before something new can be built.
Yeah, and to your point about the job of, say, a parish priest, for example, kind of keep the status quo, keep the parish, the school running,
Yeah.
make sure the over 50 club is entertained, and the preschool is going smoothly, and all these things
Sure.
are very important. But in a previous conversation with Lou Savory, he was talking about how he's just really seeking to hear homilies and to hear messages from the pulpit that don't just preach about saving our souls, which for so long has been
Yeah.
the preoccupation of the Catholic mind, or the religious mind, we could say, the Christian mind, at least in that way.
Yeah.
Maybe in the East things are a little bit different ideologically or framework wise, but at any rate, it's not so much about saving our souls, but now it's about saving the world. And I think that you can, or the challenge is to, not you can, the challenge now is to, for anyone, whether they're a parish priest, whether they're an accountant, whether, whatever profession they find themselves in, a homemaker, a grandparent, whatever it might be, do those small tasks every day with like a universal mindset, with a cosmic mindset in a way.
There you go.
That in some way you are stitching a small thread within that larger cosmic tapestry in that way. And I mean, I'm thinking every Sunday how the priest has an opportunity to, in their homily, expand upon the scriptures in a way that, like you said, is more, I'll use the word liberally, but is more mystical.
Yes.
Are we going to inspire everyone to be mystics? Yeah, I think we can. I think everyone is a mystic on some level. They have their own unique, special, individual way of connecting with God. And we look to Catholic tradition, we look to the saints, right? And there are all these different people. It's like a hall of fame of people that have some special way of connecting with God. You've got your Francis of Assisi, it's through service, it's through nature. You have your more academic orders where it's more cerebral in the head and philosophical. You have your more service-based orders, and it's just interesting in that way, how the field plays out in these different forms. And to your point, it's an evolution, right? Is every preacher going to be at the pulpit talking about Teilhard de Chardin or Thomas Berry or even a Thomas Merton or something? Like, these names are controversial, unfortunately, to some people. And I think a lot of that goes back to identity. And I gave it a retreat earlier this year, and this group of women locally here who have been meeting with me for the past 3 years. And the first 2 years we did 2 works from Teilhard. We did, I think it was the Divine Milieu the first year, then the Mass on the World.
Yeah.
And they were a little in over their head, but they were approaching the retreat with their heart.
Yeah.
And the wisdom that was spilling forth was just something that you could not get in a classroom or a seminary, anything for that matter. But to my point, this year I gave a retreat on mysticism. And it was a little bit of, a new thing not a new thing, going back to my graduate studies and dipping back into those resources and stuff. So it was good to be able to share. But really, again, just what they shared spoke to the experience of, like you said, if everyone in the parish were having an experience of God and sharing that with their pastor, it might raise some concern. But in this container of a weekend, or it wasn't even a weekend, it was a few weekdays we met together of maybe 72 hours. Just such powerful insights were shared from a very common place, a common language. It was nothing over anyone's head, and it was very, very blessed in that way.
Yeah, so we are in a transitional time. Nobody's making this happen except God.
Right.
But again, here's where we have to keep adjusting our way of looking at the world, and Teilhard and other scientists help us do this. This adjustment might take 100 years, 500 years, something like that. And, we're not going to get to the promised land, if you will. But we also can't deny what's happening here. And, rather than lament the bare ruin choirs, that Shakespeare talks about, maybe it's time for us just to, look with fresh eyes in a new way to what is coming in the future.
Yeah.
But then just to, go back to the religious thing, that's not the agenda of everyday religion, especially on parish levels.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned some of those other religious orders, who do these kinds of things a little more.
It's true. Different
like
than
the
an
Jesuits.
archdiocese. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
An archdiocese, no, you scared a guy to death, even if you just go and ask your pastor or your parish priest, would you teach me how to meditate?
Yeah.
Whoa. That's not their thing.
Yeah.
And that was part of, my own little journey there. I stayed in the ministry 17 years after my awakening.
Okay.
And there were two things going on. The people were increasingly ready for this message.
Yeah.
This is the thing. If you're just talking to yourself, it really can be discouraging. Mm-hmm. But there were always people who wanted more, more, more. And I was always happy to do that. But the institution had no idea where I was coming from.
Okay.
Zero.
Right.
Just for example, in the Diocese of Camden, they're probably all like this. That's been around for, 100 and some years. Mm-hmm. I am the only priest ever to study spirituality. Ever. So none before, none after, and none in the foreseeable future, based on what we see is out there today. So it's really, really tough for people who are spiritually hungry, because we're kind of caught in the middle. Interesting quote from Teilhard de Chardin's friend, the young girl who knew him when she was up in New York. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and there's, I was actually thinking of doing an episode on this story.
Okay.
Because there was a debate that erupted at the Conference on the Mass on the World a few years ago, over whether or not this actually happened.
Oh.
So I'm trying to think of the person's name.
Jean
Houston.
Jean Houston.
My God. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the person that's been referred to as Hillary's guru.
Well, she's it's a spiritual teacher to many and a profound storyteller, and I guess that was a part of the questioning within this conference was knowing that she is a profound storyteller.
Yes.
Based on historical evidence. So at any rate, I think that's a juicy topic for an episode unto itself. So, but
it is.
Continue with the bigger idea.
The bigger idea was this. And this, I guess, is kind of hers. We give her credit for this one. She referred to the people today, roughly the year 2000 and onwards. How things are broken down in the 2,000-year segments is another topic for another day.
That axial ages, right?
Axial age,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
we'll do another episode.
I'd love to. But she calls us the people of the parenthesis, which I love. In other words, you talk about bridge building. You came from a very traditional background. So did I. An uncle who was a priest, an aunt who was a nun. We were the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. But yet we're not there anymore.
Yeah.
And my brothers and sisters aren't there. And their kids aren't there. So, but we're not yet at an area where you can go to church, let's say, and expect anything solid or deep.
Yeah.
So we're caught in the middle, as it were. We're in the parenthesis. But here's a beautiful thing that she said. She said, that shows us that God must really love this generation. Because God is putting a lot of trust in our generation to help us move from the personal to the transpersonal. from the traditional to the cosmic awareness of ourselves as sons and daughters of God.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and that nice, the people of the parentheses.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's a time of transition for sure. And it's challenging for a lot of people, and people naturally, therefore, in times of challenge and trial, I think turn back to what they know in terms of their belief systems. But when they're turning back with a lifetimes or a number of years worth of experience, a couple decades worth of experience, and they find that they're not satisfied in some way, they naturally seek something more. So yeah, like you said, this is a natural part of evolution's unfolding in this way. So you've mentioned a few times, mystical experience or just spiritual experience being so formative for not just anyone, but for yourself in particular.
Yes.
So was there any particular experience or a teacher that you encountered that really opened you up and gave you a larger view?
Well, besides Jesus, of course, who truly... I agree with every single thing he's ever said. It's just sometimes we don't understand what he's saying.
And to your point, too, I want to interrupt and just make the point quickly that it's not just like he's this external person, but a lived reality, right? A reality within us, and how we move through the movements in Jesus' life within our own life, our experience, our own Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, Easter Sundays, many resurrections sometimes, many rebirths we might experience in a lifetime. So I just want to be clear about that.
Absolutely. That the last thing that Jesus ever wanted was for people to worship him. Oh, we have to worship the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. We have to, he would always be saying, look, grow up, will you? It's time to become the message and not just follow the teacher.
Right.
Okay, but to go through the same steps as the teacher. So anyway, there always has been and always will be Jesus as the teacher. Of all the images of Jesus, that's my favorite. It isn't too much with most people, like Jesus the Savior and all that. To me, it was Jesus the teacher. It still is, because that's the way my mind works. But here's one I'm going to really... betray my lack of depth on this one, I guess. A person who wrote a book that really shocked me a bit was Ram Dass.
Okay.
With his book, Be Here Now.
Yeah.
I remember I spent a couple days out in the woods reading that book, and my head was spinning. I said, what he is saying, makes sense here. And it goes to what we're getting at here, I guess, that Jesus is one thing, Christ is another.
Yeah.
Christ was not Jesus' last name.
Yeah.
We all have the Christ within us. We all have the true self within us.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then I would go back to the scriptures too, and St. Paul, I thought really was on to stuff. He gets a lot of bad press. But some of his understandings of the cosmic Christ and everything, you read them now, it's, oh boy, I'd love to have lunch with him sometime. But then, Carl Jung, Teilhard de Chardin, when I read that, oh my God, this is really tying it together. It's tying together Christianity with all religions, with evolution, with science, with the second coming of Christ, the whole thing. So what all these things were doing, when you add them all together, like what was the through line through all these people, Jesus up to Teilhard de Chardin, it was trying to say, you're not the center of the universe. Okay, that's it.
Right.
You belong to something. That's your identity.
Yeah.
And people who are ego-centered, their journey is to have that transformed.
Right.
That's the journey.
Well, hence the salvation of our soul, not the salvation of the world, right?
Yes, but the two are linked.
Well, in a larger view, they're linked. But when we're just so hyper-focused, that's that evolutionary stage of consciousness or religious consciousness we're in, right?
Yes.
It is still very much about me and my tribal identity, and that person's not Catholic or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
They're practicing yoga. Sometimes we get into
Yeah.
and so I think it speaks to that challenge that's implicit within that.
Sure.
Mm.
And we're asking different questions
Right.
today, even. The salvation of our planet, ecology, all these things. Is ecology a Catholic, a Christian thing, or is it a universal thing?
Right.
And I think where we're going, and I'm not going to live to see it, I'm 81 years of age, but we're moving towards a kind of a universal religion, if you will. All right, now that's not going to make anybody happy when they hear that,
Right,
because that's the ultimate bridge builder thing.
Right.
Everybody's going to have to give up this idea that I have the truth and you don't, or my truth is better than yours,
Right.
instead of just different.
Right.
But that's where it has to go. And maybe if Christianity is big enough, it could even make room for a branch of Christianity that incorporates Christian symbols but sees them as metaphor,
Yeah.
which is what Jung did.
Right.
So, that's a whole different thing. This is evolution right now, and you
Yeah.
and I are engaged in it in this conversation here.
Right.
You know?
And I'm thinking of how, that could happen when you talk about a branch of Christianity forming, like an order, perhaps in some way or whatever, where there are enough egos, not in the negative sense, there just are enough individual identities that have found a common identity in this one
Yes.
particular practice of spirituality or
Yes.
what may be, right, interpretation of the faith, and then it forms a more institutional identity in that way. So, excuse me, I go back and forth. I would say I am more interested in that evolution within the person, within the psyche, more than within an institution. But then I go to the meta scale of things, and I think of that evolution cosmically, and therefore you can't just get from the person to the cosmos in that way. You have to think of everything in between, every system,
Right.
every an institution, every conglomeration of not just people, of cells in that way, right, and how they form. So,
Okay, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
And, I think
It's like an oscillation or telescoping. Like I go real in and then real out, and I tend to sometimes like kind of glance over the institutions, and I just wonder. I'm just kind of going off the cuff here. If that's just because, I certainly have trauma from within institutions and whatnot, and I would like to think I've done my best to address that stuff. But sometimes it's just like, oh man, there really are old wounds here that maybe I don't want to get into. Or I think now, like in this position that I'm in life, not just vocationally in a job, but just like where I am in my point in life and my experience I've had in working in the church in particular, meet people and I hear or see what they're going through, and sometimes it just breaks my heart. Because on a level of empathy, I've been through it too, and it's just like I know how much that sucks. I know how much it hurts to feel the knife turned or whatever it might be in that way. That's just sharing a little bit of a personal challenge in the moment, but at any rate, yeah. And to your point about Ram Dass too, I don't look at it as any lack of depth of character.
I know.
He tells his spiritual story in Be Here Now, but he also has this very hyper-rational, pictorial, artistic portrayal of that.
Yes.
And, I think you have to be more spiritually oriented, spiritually minded to kind of get into his psyche and what that means. Because spirituality is a very irrational thing in so many ways. Hyper-rational. Not irrational, hyper-rational. Right?
Or,
transrational.
Transrational,
good way to say it. Yeah, it takes us beyond rationality, beyond logic.
It incorporates it, but then goes beyond it.
That's right. Yeah, we don't forget about it and negate it. We go beyond it, right? I think of that scene from, you pointed this out in one of your courses, Indiana Jones. And is it the Last Crusade? when he's crossing the cavern.
That's right.
There is no foreseeable way to cross. It's just a cavern, and he's going to fall into a pit. But he, what does it take? Throws out the dirt, and he sees there's an invisible bridge there, and takes that leap of faith.
And he's still not sure that dirt's going to support him.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what I was getting at before, where for a lot of people, the experience of God does come first, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
Right.
But, that is the case, I think, for many people, because for most people, including myself, you have to be backed into a corner.
Yeah.
If God is really going to use you.
Mm-hmm.
And, with me, and I've written about this and spoken about it, I had to be to the point of contemplating suicide.
Mm.
Wow, what the heck is that about? Well, later I understood it.
Right.
That it was really God was calling me to egocide.
Yeah.
Okay, not suicide. You can't really ever kill your soul or your spirit. But you can, as Jesus put it, die to self. This is what he meant. As a young guy, I scratched my head. What does that mean?
Yeah. Right.
Die to self. That's what he meant. He understood it all.
Right.
It's this idea that you are a solo practitioner on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking on the earth. No, you're not. You're part of the earth.
Right.
Part of the universe.
Yeah.
And, that is also where science is now really, really showing us that we're not crazy for thinking this. That quantum physics, for example, is saying exactly the same thing.
Mm.
So this is, to me, a really exciting time where, we have religion is not the answer. Okay, spirituality is. All right. The old science isn't the answer. The new science is. And then with psychology, the old Freudian psychology isn't the answer. The Jungian approach and the transpersonal approach, this is the answer.
Right.
So it's going to be tough as we work it all out, but I kind of see a plan here. I see a blueprint.
Yeah.
That God is working out. But again, we're the people of the parenthesis.
Yeah, and there's a change in the paradigm too, like you said. It's not this old way of viewing the world and approaching the way we engage with it, but now we're learning a new form in a way. And
yes,
I think of how we learn a lot from unlearning too, right?
Oh.
We learn most important things from unlearning our old ways and old things. Yeah, yeah. So where do you observe a synthesis between this new physics and between spirituality, and where would you maybe see some difference?
Mm-hmm. The new spirituality is really the old spirituality understood for the first time.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, like Jesus did not invent love your neighbor as yourself, etc. Right. These things have been understood for thousands of years.
It's implicit to the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're waking up to all of that, and we're realizing that the goal of religion should be to help people become spiritual. Mm. Okay? It's not that yet. Mm-hmm. It's the goal of religion, the way it's practiced, is to help people become more religious. It's not evil. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's leaving people feeling like they haven't been fed.
Yeah.
So, spirituality has to be more important than religion, and a manifestation of that spirituality is the mystical approach, where you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into God and realizing you're part of it all. Then we look maybe at science here. Mm-hmm. Okay? Can we look at that a little bit?
Sure.
We have the old physics and the new physics. And I had this thing that God was telling me at 31 and a half years of age, you have to figure out how these things fit together. Mm. spirituality took me a while to get to that point, but I couldn't understand how it would fit with the old physics.
Mhm.
And the reason is it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
The old physics, the stuff that we were taught and our parents were taught, were things like some things are alive, some things are dead.
Yeah.
What goes up must come down. Okay? And the third thing is Physics 101, Chemistry 101, that things are either solid, liquid, or gas.
Mm-hmm.
We now realize none of that is true. It's not even debatable.
I think they've already found the fourth phase of matter in that way, right? Yeah, it's like,
So this is just in our lifetime.
yeah, right.
So, okay, that was a huge revelation to me. And then I started to look into some of these people who had discovered this primarily from a scientific point of view.
Mhm.
But I saw a couple things there. One, they were always scientists, but they also had an openness to things beyond traditional science. They had like a spiritual side to themselves. All right? And when we talk about this quantum physics,
Mhm.
okay, now this comes from a guy who had a hard time passing high school chemistry.
Me too. Well, I was in advanced math until they added letters into the equation with algebra and then chemistry. And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, I'm done.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I tell people with algebra,
I thought math was numbers and they had letters.
yes. If A equals B, they lost me on the first day. How could A equals B? Duh. I don't know. At the end of my freshman year in algebra, Sister Grata called me up and she said, Thomas, the thing is you really failed algebra, but I'll make a deal with you. I'll give you a 70 if you promise never to take algebra again. So you got a deal.
It's an offer you couldn't refuse, right?
So, we're not trying to be geniuses here.
Right,
I'm not, you're not.
Sure.
But yet, we do have a certain sense of infused knowledge. You and I have an intuition about these things.
Yes.
So as simple teachers, that's what we're trying to communicate, to people. So the two people who were the harbingers of this new physics, Max Planck,
Mm-hmm.
who was the teacher of a guy by the name of Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being the teacher of Albert Einstein. And what they did was to try to look deeper and deeper into matter and to see where it would lead. Okay? So, we had some of this growing up. You have an organism, and the organism is made out of organs. The organs are made out of cells. The cells are made out of atoms. The atoms are made out of neutrons and protons and electrons. But then they went deeper. The quanta approach here is to go as deep as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to a level they called the quarks, which are random patterns of energy. Okay? So, they've been introducing science to this, and science, okay, they kind of get it.
Yeah.
But then they went a step further, and they said beyond the random patterns of energy, there's consciousness. We can't get behind consciousness. Consciousness is as deep and as far as we can go. Okay? So, consciousness is superior to everything that is created. Now, the way you could explain that to a fourth grader
Mm-hmm.
is to say God, i.e., consciousness, created the world.
Right.
Okay? So they have completely given an understanding of the scientific truth here behind everything. It's
Yeah.
consciousness.
Right.
And, Jesus was asked, who are you? I am who am. Right? He couldn't get beyond
Awareness.
and
Right.
consciousness.
Yeah.
So we all have that within us. Okay, so what are the implications of that?
Mhm.
The implications are, now this we would teach maybe to an 8th grader, is that we're all sons and daughters of God. That everybody in the flesh has been brought here, not by coincidence, but by an intelligent form of consciousness
Mhm.
that embraces everything that we would call a God.
Right.
So Max Planck, for those who might be interested, he ended up becoming kind of a nice, faithful member of his Protestant congregation.
Okay.
But he understood that there were two separate things. The church was not going that deep.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
And the same with Einstein. He was raised as a Jewish person, but he went way beyond all that. He didn't disagree with any of it, but he was just saying, folks, you're not really getting deep enough into this whole thing. And on this level, he said there's things you got to understand, like matter is neither created nor destroyed. Ooh, okay, the old physics said some things are alive
Mhm.
and some things are dead.
Mhm.
And St. Paul and he said life has changed, not ended. So what they're saying is that everything is basically recycled. We have the same amount of H2O, water, that we had 15 billion years ago.
Right.
The air is the same that Jesus breathed and other people. So the whole universe
Mhm.
is alive,
Mhm.
alive.
Mhm.
And, the old physics said, well, what goes up must come down. And now we know that there's all kind of junk matter floating around up there in space
Right.
that probably never will come down. So, we
Right.
don't buy that one anymore.
Yeah, and just that alone shows how there's still the law of gravity,
Yes.
but it changes, or there's a different approach to it when you change different conditions within it, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Or, if I may, it's the rules of gravity haven't changed as long as you're dealing with the rules of gravity.
All gravity on Earth.
Yes.
Yeah, because you could be on the moon, for
That's right.
example, and you have different laws or rules of gravity that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, neither one of us are scientists in this capacity, so if we
Thank
mess
you.
that up,
Yeah, please
we're
forgive
sorry,
us.
and just hopefully you understood our larger point in that. So
Yeah, no, that's it. And so, what are the implications then for, let's say, spirituality and quantum physics?
Mhm.
Because that's kind of like, what we're talking about here.
Something ancient and something very new in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ancients, all the people from ancient Egypt, we know that Moses was taught in the court of the king of Egypt. So he brought all those teachings over.
Right,
I mean, that's what he was. He was the leader of the Jewish people. So they have this kind of teaching. And this was picked up by Jesus, who was Jewish himself. And, he was taught enough things. And what they were trying to say were things like the whole God is spirit and the whole world is spirit. And from the age of the Enlightenment onwards, what does this mean? This is nonsense.
Mhm.
Because physics at that time was just trying to measure everything. Well, oh no, it's not that way. but they understood things on a deeper level. Something, I think it was Teilhard who said it, could have been Lou Savory, one of his disciples, who taught me a lot, by the way. He was actually one of my teachers up at Fordham.
Okay.
I had the world's greatest teachers, George Maloney, Thomas Berry. I don't know how it ever happened that, they were all there. But anyhow, here's the thing that is attributed to Teilhard. Now, this one you got to write down if you haven't heard this one before. He says, what we call matter is only spirit that is moving slow enough for us to be able to measure it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now there's some equation there between is spirit the same as energy? You can, quibble by those kind of things. But essentially, that's what they're saying, that we think that was the other thing, the things are solid, liquid, or gas. Oh, this table absolutely is solid. No, it's not. Not because some woo-woo New Age person has said it, but if you were to look at this table under a high-powered enough electron microscope, you find out that it is alive. And electrons are jumping from this desk onto me, and from me onto this desk.
And from you to me, and me to you, and
so on, and so on.
Right.
And this is wonderful.
Yeah. I don't think that we live in a simulation without getting into that theory. I'm sure you've heard it pitched before that we live in a simulation and there's some master programmer or something like that. I mean, that language starts to lend itself in a very religious direction. And there are nuances, of course, but to say that we live in a simulation, I think, is really oversimplifying things. And we live in such a vast complexity of interbeing and interrelationship and interconnection that it's something much more mysterious than we can use a computational analogy with, I believe. That's just a personal thought there.
No, that's really good. And how about if we just mention one more thing before I forget it? Because this 81-year-old brain doesn't work that well as it used to. But any big differences, let's say between, on the one hand, Max Planck and Einstein, and the spiritual masters, the St. Teresa of Avila's, and St. Francis of Assisi and St. Bernard and all that. What's the big difference here? Teilhard de Chardin. Our faith, this is where you can't prove it, says that there is a direction to creation. Okay, here's what Planck and Einstein say. They say that there is no inherent plan to it all. Okay, that's where we say our evidence causes us to take the leap of faith and say that it is. And Jesus says in so many words that there is a big plan, and there is a new heaven and a new earth coming. When St. Paul is, so big on that. So I thought, okay, well, we have a difference here. But I looked into this a little deeper, and it turns out, though, that while they do not say there's a purpose, they do say that the individual can help to determine what the future is.
Sure. We're co-creators.
Co-creators.
We don't just exist independent of the Creator. We are called to exist in relationship with the Creator. And that relationship draws us into that identity as well as being a creator. But we are not the Creator. We are not God. We are children of God. We're co-creators.
That's it.
Tom just pointed to the image. The image says
there it
itself.
is.
Yeah,
You know, we're in this thing together.
yeah,
So the Father, the Mother, the Creator. Yeah, we're not that. You'd have
Right.
to be psychotic to say that you're that.
right,
You know, the mental hospitals are filled with people who say,
sure,
I am God.
right,
But I think that people like Einstein and others would say there ought to be just as many people in mental hospitals who think that in some way they don't have a larger calling.
yeah,
You know, so you're
Yeah.
not God everything, but yet you are part of
right,
the whole. Part of the whole. So our choices matter. The people that we're with matter.
mm,
When I drive home today, I'm going to have to really be careful to keep my eye on the road because I'm being strongly influenced by a son of God, as we all are, who knows that he's a son of God. And I'm going to be stronger. My faith is going to be stronger as a result of this. And I hope to some extent I can transfer some of that to you and to anybody
yeah,
who might be watching in the future, because we are all in this thing together.
yeah,
So, you know, the difference then isn't that the world is changing. We all agree on that. You know, the scientists and the spiritualists agree on that. The scientists say there's no inherent purpose to it. We say, well, but our faith tells us that there's a purpose. But the one thing we can agree on,
yeah,
the common ground, is that we're not just going through the motions here.
right,
You know, it's all not predestination. Everything that we do has an effect, you know, and, you know, this is where I think guys like us need to come down from our high horses sometime and to realize that your beautiful wife, Mary, is at home with your little flock of beautiful kids. What she is doing in the mind of God is just as important as what we're doing here.
Now it's more important.
More important.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah,
It is. And the same with my wife, who just teaches me in a different way, teaches me about beauty. I never knew anything about beauty in my life. And she teaches me there's beauty everywhere. So it's different, but one is not better than another.
right,
But you're either aware of all these things or you're just going blind. So to me, it's a really exciting time. I just hope people are catching on to this stuff.
yeah,
I see it happening now with, you know, the Einsteins. I
Right.
love the guy. He's just the humblest person in the world. No ego. You know, he could be the patron saint of quantum physicists. He wins a Nobel Prize.
yeah.
He walks up on the stage to get it, and he forgot to put his socks on. So, you know, he's a man who's been,
A true scientist,
well-
stuck in the lab, right? Yeah.
well, you know, in a sense, it's a man without
yeah. Without guile.
without guile.
Yeah,
He's another Nathaniel. And there's no self-centered ego.
Mm.
His ego is at the service of his higher self.
and even as we look back in history and we're given a more sober look on some of these figures, Martin Luther King and Gandhi, like we start to learn sides of them that weren't perfect.
Sure.
They may have been a tendency to be a womanizer or something, may have
Yes.
had a proclivity towards alcohol or something. I'm not speaking specifically to anyone here, but just
I
like
gotcha.
there's this kind of question now amongst my generation of like, you know,
Mhm.
based on what we have seen over the past, not just 6 years, like really the past decade, there's been a lot of revision within the way history is presented.
Yeah.
And I mean, take Thanksgiving, for example, right? We
Mhm.
once thought Thanksgiving was this very wholesome sharing of a meal
Yes.
between the settlers and
Yeah.
the indigenous people, and now we know a different story of that. And are there elements from both that make up the reality? Probably to some degree, right?
But does it matter?
And does it matter because we're getting to something bigger here? Yeah. So I
Right.
mean, the point is that like even what we may have learned about some of these people now is to learn they weren't the perfect people we once learned in elementary school them to be, because that's what
right.
our third grade mind and morality system could process, right?
That's right.
We still are challenged to see beyond that and see the bigger picture and see
Yes.
their role in something so much larger than themselves and their willingness to be humble.
Yes.
Because if you're not willing to be humble, then you're not going to have that, I think, true place within that larger vision in a way. Because then you're always going to be relying on your vision, and it's more about, my will be done rather than thy will be done.
Absolutely.
I love the prayer from St. Oscar Romero when he says, I can't, you must, I am yours, show me the way.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just such a simple and powerful mantra, for me at least.
Yeah.
In many phases of my life, I find myself going back and repeating, sometimes several times a day, I can't do this. I've got to turn it over to you, God. I've got to turn it over to this larger reality that I'm part of, that I hold in some way because I'm a part of it, but really it's holding me.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And you can, to use St. Paul's image, you, God, can draw straight lines with crooked instruments.
Yeah.
See, this is the beauty. So that's why, I'll always be just Tom Legere. And I started off today by saying I'm nobody special. As long as you get that out there, there's no transference. Nobody's disappointed.
Right.
You're just talking, to this guy who's just sharing from his heart. He might be right, he might be wrong, but it's not about you.
Right.
It's about the truth that's coming through. And even with saints, it never meant that they were perfect, the saints. It meant that God is coming through them despite their weaknesses. When you look at them, you don't focus so much on the weakness, although it's there, and they will be the first ones to tell you that. But what you feel is the truth coming through.
Right.
When Pope Francis spoke to the crowds for the first time at St. Peter's Square, very first thing he said, well, I want you all to pray for me.
Yeah.
And everybody was shocked by that.
Right.
And then he said, what can I tell you about myself? He said, the very first thing I can tell you is I'm a sinner. And people, ooh, wait a minute. We don't want to hear that from the Pope. Or this is some kind of false piety.
Right.
No, he knew himself.
Yeah.
So don't judge the truth by finding some flaws in me, because I'm telling you, on the first day, the first minute, they're there.
Right. Well, this has been a treat to sit down with you today, to be able to just engage with your wisdom and your experiences that you've shared. So as we get ready to wind down our time here today, I'm curious, and I'm sure our audience is wondering too, how does Tom Legere find sacred with the synergy in his own life?
By trying to realize that there is no such thing as the profane. Everything is really sacred. So rather than say, well, like church, okay, that's sacred, right? Prayer is sacred. But taking out the trash, well, no, that's the profane. No, it's all holy. And the saints are telling us this. Jesus is telling us this. The quantum physicists are telling us this. That, when you take some trash and don't put it in a trash can, you have hurt the whole. Okay? And that simple little thing helps to redeem the whole and make it healthy again. You can't escape.
And even in a maybe more practical sense, like, okay, we've heard your body is a temple, right? your house is a temple too. Where you live is a temple. And,
Sure.
right? So you got to keep the temple clean.
Of course.
You've got to take the trash out. It's a sacred duty
Sure it is.
of being a homeowner, living in a place, right?
Yeah, but it's all depends how you
Right.
see it.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's probably been the biggest thing.
yeah,
And my wife has taught me a lot about that, the importance of the little things.
Mhm.
Because, my head is caught up in all these ideas and probably will be until I'm 6 feet under. But for her, things have their place, and there's such a thing as symmetry
okay,
and beauty, and it delights me.
yeah.
It surprises me because I'm so not that. But I'm trying to find God in the little things.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard for me though, because like even in terms of the Myers-Briggs
Sure.
test and everything,
Sure.
when I took that, when it came to sensing,
Mm-hmm.
the 5 senses, I got a 0. on
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I don't see anything around me.
Okay.
If you were to ask me when I go home, oh, you
Yeah.
remember those things that were on the wall?
Yeah.
Some people, oh yeah, it was St. Paul here, and I don't see anything like that. I live in my head. But if I'm true to myself, that God is everywhere,
Yeah.
there's no place that God is not,
Yeah.
which everybody agrees with.
Right.
Well, then start treating
Yeah.
every person as Christ, every tree as Christ in a different form,
Sure.
every animal as Christ.
Yeah.
It's the spark of God
Mhm.
within us all.
Brother, sun, sister, moon.
Yes, you
Right,
can't
right.
escape it, and nor should you. That's incarnational theology.
Amen. Amen. Well, Tom, again, thank you so much for being with us today. Very grateful for all the wisdom that you've spilled forth here. You've given us a lot to think about. And I'm just going to give you an opportunity now to tell people about any maybe current projects that you have going on. I know you have a very active
Oh.
presence on Facebook with your teaching on there.
Mhm.
Do you have a website that we can direct people to?
Okay, I'll try to be real quick on
Sure.
this.
And I'll include links too for people to click on, but if you
Mm.
just want to take the time now to give your own work a plug.
Okay, fair enough. Which isn't my work, and I'm not, trying to be
Sure,
funny
sure,
about
yeah,
that. It's all
yeah.
God's work, I hope. But I have a website which needs a lot of work, but it's tomlegere.com. Can't miss that one. It's all one word. So you can find out information there to track me down, etc. I have one book that is still worthwhile. It's called Living an Authentic Life. And you can get that on Amazon. There are 2 other books that I wrote when I was in my 30s. And I feel a little bit like Thomas Merton when people kept talking about his book, The 7-Story Mountain. He said the man who wrote that book is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So don't read my first couple books.
Okay.
They were too immature.
Okay.
But one that's still good is Living an Authentic Life. And I have 2 more that I'm looking to get published. One is Spirituality, the Golden Key to Recovery.
Okay.
So that could be a big one because it's how does that work? How does recover? But I'm looking for a publisher for that one. And then I have a final one that also I'm working on getting published. And that one is Christianity for a New Age. Okay, trying to bring those 2 parts together in terms of bridge to see if there's anything worth saving there. So those things. And then the talks that I've given with the American Teilhard Association. Andrew has interviewed me a couple times on that. And what else? I have a YouTube channel,
Yep.
Thomas Legere. And there are a few talks that I've given up there, including that one I alluded to earlier, Wrestling with God. So you know how to get to that through your television. It's accessible to anybody. So I have a few of those things. The final thing is, something I'm a little ambivalent about, and that is Facebook. I know it can be misused and things like that, but I've found a way, I think, for it to be helpful. So I have a Facebook presence. I post something at this point 3 times a week, usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Mhm.
I'm up to 450 postings. So if you get on that, you can scroll back and see, any of those things as they're coming up. I'm not looking for large numbers, but rather people who are not interested in arguing with me,
Right.
Yeah. But are just open. So that's basically it. And then through whatever way God can bring us together in the future. That's to you, Brother Andrew, and to you, whomever you are.
Wonderful. Tom, thank you so much for your time today, for coming out here so we could record in person. And our prayer is that just in all that we've shared today, hopefully this conversation has been healing and beneficial and transformational for whoever else might be tuning in.
Amen.
Well, end it on that.
Yeah.